Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Season 4 of Vestiges After Dark. And I'm your host, Bishop Brian Willett, coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains on this August 10th, 2021. Tonight, on Vestiges After Dark, we have traumatic hauntings and Ted Bundy. But first, answering some of your questions. Don't go away. Well, welcome everyone to a brand new season of Vestiges After Dark. I am so happy that I am here with you tonight on this new season, and that we have so much really set up for you for the next couple of months. We got some really good shows and some really great guests and some fantastic topics. I am still getting used to this new audio mixer and the new switchboard. So bear with me as we work through things, because it seems like every time you set this machine up, something different happens with it that has to be sorted out. And you'd think that starting, getting everything ready about an hour ahead of time would be enough time. And it's never enough time. I think if I even, did this 2 hours in advance, there would be something that I needed 3 hours to fix. But I think we've got it working pretty good tonight. I'm sure some of you in the chat room there will let me know if it's not working out great, but I'll be depending upon you guys to let me know how we're doing, because I'm really very much dependent upon what you see and how it appears on YouTube, at least for those of you listening on YouTube. And we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're on both of our pages, Vestiges After Dark and The Exorcist Bishop on Facebook. We're also on Daily Motion, I think, I hope. We're on Twitch and on Spreaker by audio, all live tonight. So it's going to be a really good show, and we've got a really great guest tonight. But before we get started with the topic of the evening, I wanted to answer some questions that I have seen come in over the last week. I like to do that at the beginning of the show. And there's some good ones. One that's really important, I think, probably more important than anything else, is the question I get very often. I think it was prompted perhaps by the new direction of the ministry to set up a demonologist program to hopefully expand the reach of this ministry so that it's not all on our shoulders and we can get more support from some of you. So people are asking me, how do I become an exorcist? And, that's always a loaded question, because first of all, you really don't want to be an exorcist. You don't choose this course of action for your life. This chooses you. And in the Catholic tradition, it's the church that pretty much chooses you to do this work. It's not something that you set up with, you say, oh, I'm going to go be an exorcist for the Catholic Church. And that's not something that anybody that even has a remotely, interested direction or vocation towards religious life, they don't say that. So, essentially in the Catholic tradition, as long as it's applying to how we operate as a ministry, one has to be a priest. One has to be called to be a priest. It's not just a direction that you choose and say, well, I want to be an exorcist. No one's just an exorcist in the Catholic Church. You're a priest. You're a pastor. You do all of the other things that must be done. And exorcism is just one of the roles, one of the duties that is assigned to you. But no one is exclusively an exorcist. Everyone is operating in the capacity or the full capacity of a priest, hearing confessions, saying the Mass, all of the sacraments, everything else that's part of ministerial life. So if you don't feel called to ministerial life, then, I can tell you right now, this is not exorcism. Being an exorcist is not a life for you. Okay, so it's very important, I think, to understand that, to know that, and to accept that, because what we'll be doing when we set up the demonology program is not training exorcists. We'll be training people in spiritual crisis prevention and spiritual crisis resolution, all the way up to, but not to the extent of actual exorcism. No one that will be part of this program will be performing exorcisms. Demonologists do not, in the Catholic Church anyway, perform exorcisms. They are a supplemental team. They're mostly part of the investigation team. They learn to diagnose and identify the various types of spiritual problems that can happen, but they don't perform the exorcism. That is something that is reserved for clergy only, and only those that are trained in that particular operation. Okay. So I don't know. Hopefully that clears up some of the confusion that I get, because that's a question I see regularly. People are always asking me, I want to be an exorcist. What do I need to do? Well, you need to decide whether or not you feel you have a vocation to the priesthood. If you have a vocation to the Catholic priesthood, then you pursue that. And then maybe in 10, 20, 30 years, the church might call on you to do exorcisms, but it's not something you go and pursue. And you certainly don't go into the vocation with the idea that you're going to come out an exorcist. I didn't do that. This was thrown at me. And honestly, I can tell you right now, after having lived the life of exorcist, I can tell you that I really have no interest in I would have had no interest in doing this. This was just strictly something that became a part of my life, and something that I simply had to carry out for the sake of the people that I was caring for pastorally. But I did not want this, and I would not go and do it again. If I had the option to just be the kind of priest that would sit in the church and, say Mass and marry people and do all the things that pastors do, baptize children, confirm, teenagers to the faith, teach them. That's where I saw myself. That's where I felt called. That's where I wanted to be. And then, this work was thrust upon me. And it's just that you've seen me on television and you know me as the exorcist. You don't really know me as the pastor as much. Hopefully we're changing that a little bit by having the live stream of the Mass, and I know that a lot of you are coming to that and starting to get more familiar with it, and a lot of you are enjoying it. I wish more did, actually. I wish as many people as listen to this show would actually participate in the live Mass with us. But I understand, it's a type of flavor that only appeals to a certain sort. So there's no problem with that. But that's the answer. Okay, so you first have to identify whether or not you are called to priesthood. And then if the church calls on you at some point, assuming you make it to the priesthood, if the church calls on you at some point to assist in that capacity, then you, under your vow of obedience, should comply. But you wouldn't go into it pursuing it. So hopefully that clears it up. I know that kind of distresses people when I tell them that. But it's kind of important, I think, that everyone understands how that works. And lastly, I just wanted to say, someone was asking another question that came in kind of related to this show. Why was the lineup for this season also non-Christian? We actually do have some theological series with Father Chris Yates coming up. We just haven't talked about what what the subject matter is going to be. So don't rest assured, those of you who are looking for the Christian theological discussions, we'll have some of those this season. They're just not published yet. But the reason that so much of the lineup is dealing with things like serial killers, like tonight, the spirit attachments, a little bit of witchcraft thrown in there. The reason that we are covering some of these other subjects is because Vestiges After Dark is the sister show to the original podcast, Vestiges of Christianity. Vestiges of Christianity was just a show on ancient Christianity and ancient Christian theology. It had a very small following of people. But because of my involvement with the paranormal field and people thirsting for more, but the difficulty of getting a new show picked up by a network, it can take years. It might never happen. You never really know. We wanted to give something back to all of our fans from Ghost Adventures and all of our fans that we've picked up from the paranormal world. And so I, a few years ago, decided we need a show that deals with this kind of subject matter and also talks about some of the other things in religion. And that's what makes the Holy Nicolean Catholic Church such an interesting church, is that we don't just limit ourselves to the Christian tradition in terms of what we talk about, what we study, what we teach. We like to open dialogue. We're not, we don't like exclusivity, and we certainly don't like spiritual elitism. In fact, I don't like elitism of any kind. But, it is something that we do sometimes see in religion, and we've tried and worked very hard to avoid anything of that nature going forward. So hopefully by talking to witches, you'll learn that they're not devil worshippers. And by talking about serial killers, you won't become one. And that's really what the goal here is about. Look, I live firmly as an exorcist by the philosophy that you cannot fight evil unless you learn evil intimately. You must understand evil. You must embrace evil in order to really fight it and destroy it. There's no other way to do it. Okay, that doesn't mean that you accept it. By embracing it, I don't mean that that's acceptance. No, I am saying embrace it by getting to know it, by taking the devil by the neck and suffocating him into your bosom instead of it being the other way around. And that's how I operate. That's why I'm a successful exorcist, and that's why I'm very good at what I do. Because evil is something that I don't let have power over me. And I also understand that evil has no power that I don't willingly give it. And that protects me. That's my only protection that I need. I don't need talismans. I wear a cross when I'm in uniform, but you never see me with one when I'm not. It's not because I don't believe in the cross. It's not because I don't think they're nice to wear, or not that I think that you shouldn't wear one. But I don't wear these things as objects of protection, because my protection, the only protection I have ever needed, is the knowledge that the devil has no power that I don't freely give him myself. As long as I don't give him any, he has none. And that's all the protection anyone really needs. That's all the protection you need. You don't need to be a priest to do that. Tonight we're talking about evil. But first, let's go ahead and bring Sister Mary Joan on. How are you tonight, Sister? Let me make sure that you're unmuted, because Zoom is kind of crazy over here.
There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. How are you tonight?
Oh, it was an interesting start, but we're good to go now.
Yeah, it's going to take a little while to get used to all of this. There's a lot hooked up tonight. Skype wasn't working for one thing, so I spent way too much time trying to get Skype up and working. The number that we gave out 2 weeks ago when we did the preseason show is not the correct number. And
that's good to know.
Yeah, and so now there's a new number, and I'm going to go ahead and put that up on the screen for everybody right now, so that you have it. Now, this is, I've said so many times before, it's such a frustration. I said, don't worry, This is the number. Write it down because it's not going to change. Well, guess what? It changed. But let me go ahead and put that number up on the screen here for you. There it is. It's now 347-338-1860. 347-338-1860. And the PIN number now is 110-0999. Okay. 347-338-1860. PIN number 110-0999. That shouldn't change now, but you never know. So hopefully that's not going to be an issue going forward.
Always something.
Always something. Yes. So I'm going to take that off the screen just because we're not going to be taking callers until the second half of the show. But you're welcome to call into the queue if you want to make sure that you secure your place. But, there's hundreds and hundreds of lines for you. So you're not going to necessarily not get through. You're going to have more of a problem where you just, we run out of time. We can't get to, but we don't typically get a whole lot of callers. Most of you ask questions in the chat room on YouTube, and that's perfectly fine. I don't have any problem with that. So tonight we are talking about Ted Bundy, and we have a fantastic guest. I mean, somebody that has actually lived on the property where Ted Bundy at Florida State University killed 2 students. And if you recall, correct me if I'm wrong, Sister Mary Joan, but I believe he was actually a refugee. I mean, not a refugee, a fugitive, rather.
Yeah, he actually escaped from jail twice.
Yeah.
Both times, I think, in Colorado. He was apprehended within like 48 hours the first time. Where he just basically jumped out a second-story window from the law library, and then the second time he crawled through a light fixture in the jail cell, and he was out on the lam when he made his way to Florida and was staying in Tallahassee, and then attacked those 5 girls in the sorority house, and then actually killed a 12-year-old girl after that before he was caught.
That was the last one. Yeah, that was the one that got him the death penalty.
Girl, that was particularly disturbing to a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's the kind of person he was, truly evil, living evil. I would say he embodied evil as we would understand it. People that do things like rape and murder.
He fooled a lot of people. He had the gift.
Well, they're mostly charming, aren't they? A lot of these serial killers are very charming.
Charismatic, and that's how he escaped the first time. Was his jailers. He was so charismatic and funny and just like a good old boy, the security got lax, and he took advantage of it, just like he took advantage of all the ladies he befriended before he slaughtered them and attacked them. I mean, he was brutal.
Yeah. No, I mean, he tortured them. He would not just rape them and kill them. He would torture them too.
Even his long-term girlfriend, up until the day he was convicted, she still was going back and forth about her feelings for him. Yeah, because he was very good to her and her daughter.
Isn't that bizarre? You're dealing with and that's one of those things that I try to educate people on when we're talking about things like demonic possession. Because I do think that is a type of possession. It really is. I think that only possession and the different variations of possession explain that, but that's not to say that it doesn't completely manifest itself through the psychology of the individual. So, certain psychological treatment, though, I can guarantee you would not have healed this person. It would not have cured Ted Bundy.
He was very intelligent. He knew what he was doing, although I do recall seeing a documentary, I think on Prime, actually, where one of the jailhouse conversations with his long-term girlfriend, Elizabeth Kendall, where he said that he couldn't control himself when these things would happen, that something would come over him, right. And that he started to enjoy it, and he could not stop himself. He knew what he was doing, but he couldn't stop himself.
Yeah, and when I remember seeing an interview with him about the 12-year-old, the last victim of his before he was eventually, permanently apprehended and then executed by electric chair, right?
Yeah, 1989.
Yeah, I remember him talking about that particular thing and not being able to discuss it, and it was like as if there was just something about that particular case, that one, that that he would not discuss. He was very open about a lot of the other ones and very matter of fact about particularly the ones we're talking about tonight, the FSU killings. I actually, if I understand the history correctly, there were 4 women that were attacked in a period of 15 minutes at FSU. 2 of them died. 2 of them lived.
It was either 4 or 5, but yeah, two were actually killed and 3 were injured.
Yeah.
And he actually stole the university's van, and that's how he got away.
Yes, and then that's where he ended up killing the last one.
Yeah, Lake City, Florida is where he found the girl who was about the same age as his girlfriend's daughter. Which I think that's what really disturbed him, is that he was capable of doing that to a girl that was the age of a girl he'd helped raise. I mean, him and his girlfriend had been together since the early 70s.
Yeah. Such a bizarre situation.
Yeah.
Well, tonight we're going to be talking about some of the metaphysical consequences of this. And, you've heard me talk about how, trauma is one of the things that tends to excite paranormal activity because it is one of those things that tends to produce an unrested soul, or an unrested spirit, really is the more accurate terminology. And that is, when a person becomes a ghost. There's a few conditions that are very conducive to producing a ghost. Not everyone who dies is going to leave behind a ghost. But trauma is one of those things. Not being ready to die is another one of those things. Sometimes traumatic death and not being ready to die kind of go hand to hand and create sort of a double impact effect.
Especially these girls especially the girls in the University of Florida. I mean, it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. They were asleep.
Yeah.
So they were woken up to being, beaten to death.
Yeah. 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 So, I mean, can you imagine, you're already probably groggy and maybe some of this doesn't even feel real. And I think one of them said that there were headlights from a car outside, and that's what saved one of their lives because he saw the lights and ran off.
Yeah, I think there's one story about one of the girls further down the hallway had gotten up to use the restroom. I guess it's a common restroom, and he heard her, and it spooked him off of one of the ladies. Yeah,
that's just a horrible thing. But 2 of them did die, and our guest tonight lived on the property where this happened. So I think, if I understand correctly, the sorority house was demolished, but the property has had a new building put up, and our guest tonight lived in the building that was now on the property where these murders happened. And his name is Tony Burkett. He's a stand-up comedian from Florida. He's the host of the comedy podcast Good Morning Jonestown, and has been featured on Bill Burr's All Things Comedy Network. So he's kind of a funny guy, but I don't know how funny tonight's topic is. I guess we're going to see what he has to say about that. But I'm going to go ahead and bring him on here so that we can ask him more about what he experienced. So let's see if, let me see if I can get him to unmute. Okay, go ahead, Tony, and unmute your mic, and welcome to Vestiges After Dark. Go ahead and choose the unmute option. You have to, there you go.
There it is. Figured it out.
Yes. How are you tonight?
Hey.
Hi, how y'all doing?
Here we are.
We're doing fantastic.
I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. Yeah, we're happy to have you. So you lived on the very place where these 2 murders happened. And you said that when you contacted me to be on the show, you mentioned to me that there was not a person you knew who lived in that building that didn't have some kind of paranormal story to tell. So this is just fascinating. I know my audience is really into this kind of subject matter, and it definitely helps to enlighten us as to the metaphysical nature of what a trauma like this, something as serious as this, not just murder, but murder, rape, and torture. All of these things occurred that night. How that has an impact on a person's dying process, because that's just about the worst way one could die. And that can leave behind disturbing energy that can eventually affect the environment for people that live in close proximity to it for years and years and years to come. We see hauntings that can go on for hundreds of years sometimes, particularly if the energy is excited and if there's a lot of energy being put into it by people noticing it. That can also lead to long-term hauntings. So I'm really curious to hear what happens. So Tony, go ahead and tell us your story.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I'm happy to be here and tell you about all of those things. And we will absolutely get to that. But it ain't every day you get to talk to an exorcist. So I just would like to. Can we start there?
Go right. That's perfectly fine.
I mean, you know, that's how I roped you in with my experience at the dorm. But so let's not make a mistake. That is not what this is about. I got great stories to tell. Don't get me wrong. Some really weird stuff happened there. But I mean, come on, talking to an exorcist, man.
It's an interesting job. I mean, I'll tell you, it's not your normal career.
Definitely not.
Here's the thing: I checked out the show enough to understand what you guys are about and what you're doing, but I didn't listen to enough to get to know exactly who you are, because that's what right now is for.
Yeah.
And so you're like the go-to exorcist for the show Ghost Adventures?
Yes. That's what I've done for Sister Mary Jane about 4 years now, I think.
2017, I think, was your first one.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
That's
so
right.
now you're just like, hands down, my most interesting friend. And yeah, I mean, honestly, this is just going to be a sales pitch to get y'all to move to Pensacola, Florida. Where
You ain't gonna twist my arm too hard to go to Pensacola.
Come on. Let's just start our journey, because we can do some big things together. We'll be
man.
like,
I'll tell you.
I've got soft crimes. I mean, there's no real there's no ceiling on where this friendship could go.
Well, you know, I'll tell you, I used to live in Florida. My father actually lived in, I've lived all over. I've lived Orlando and Palm Beach. Mostly, but my dad lived in Pensacola. We vacationed.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We vacation to the Panhandle at least once a year. So, you know, it's right now Florida is one of my favorite places because
it should be.
It's
man.
most normal.
It's the only place we got freedom.
Yeah,
I just moved back here. I was living in Portland, Oregon for 2 years.
Oh my! How did you survive all that?
Dude, let me tell you, dude. Maybe you should move there. Business ain't booming right now, because you just. I mean, there's a lot of people that you could probably unbind. I don't know what the terminology is.
Well, that might be one of the things we do.
Casting out.
I think we might need a lot of help, Tony.
Well, I'll go. We'll film it. You get your buddy Zach Baggins. What's that guy's deal?
Zach, he's an eccentric man, but he's very, very focused and very intense.
On Adderall. Okay.
I don't know.
No, he's an intense guy,
Yeah,
and you know.
Well, most people on steroids are. Right, because that's his whole thing, is like that he's going into the place to do battle with the devil. It's like, dude, you're not brave, you're on steroids. I know people like that just take some D-ball to their right nut, and if you put them in a haunted house, they'd be like, where you at, devil? Come on, bro.
Yeah,
he doesn't call him out nearly like he used to. When he was younger, he was
his younger days, he was a lot different. When we got to meet him, his approach had changed dramatically. He was, I would say, he's not much of a weightlifter anymore. I'd say he's gotten
into more cardio. I think.
More into the cardio, and then but as far as like his approach to the paranormal, he's very much into the darker aspects and studying it now. So he takes that a lot more seriously. And I think he's a little bit more cautious and not as and flippant as he used to be, where he'd, try to egg these things on to get results.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So you guys are buds.
Well, we're colleagues
right now.
Yeah, we're colleagues.
Colleagues.
Yeah, I don't see him very often.
I haven't got to meet his dog yet, so I don't consider him a friend until I get to meet his dog.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. Yeah,
that's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, if I don't know your dog, I don't know you.
Yeah.
And there you go. That's kind of true, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
I
is.
know.
It is. It
Yeah.
is.
So are you a married priest? Because I know priest that's married. I don't know if it's like what sect or order or what you call it.
Oh yes, yes. The independent movement under the old Catholic Church, which is different and separate from the Roman Catholic Church, does not have clerical celibacy as a requirement. So we're free to get married before or after ordination. And
so you're married?
yes, I am. Yeah,
How was that whole meeting the folks?
Well, I was not anything like. I mean, this was 18 years ago, so I was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was
Well,
long. It was.
cool. I was just wondering, like, what do you do for a living, son? You know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I'm an exorcist.
Yeah, no, I mean that they knew me for a long time by the time that came around. So, and after that point, I don't think it was that much of a surprise because they already knew I was a little bit eccentric myself. You know, we talk about Zach is eccentricism, but you know, I'm pretty eccentric too.
Well, I'm eccentric too. That's why I wanted to join you tonight. I'm the person who, when I meet someone within the first 5 minutes, I'm like, so what do you think about ghosts and aliens? And probably everyone that's watching this right now is.
Yeah, if you can get past that first 5 minutes, you're golden.
Yeah.
They start giving you that weird side eye, you know, oh, this probably ain't going to work out.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
Now we're weeks away from, so are you vaccinated or are you a Nazi?
I know, right? I mean, and it's like both sides are calling the other side Nazi. So you're a Nazi if you're not vaccinated. You're a Nazi if you demand that someone's vaccinated. I mean, you can't win.
Nobody's business.
You can't win.
No, you can't win either way.
So one more question: Do you have any siblings?
I have a half sister who I've never met.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably for the best.
It probably is. Yeah, it probably is. They're in a very different they're a very different type of Christian than I am. They're into the evangelical stuff, and that's just I don't touch that with a 10-foot pole. So,
because it'd be rough being your sibling, because it's like no matter what you achieve, you know, you're like a neurosurgeon or something. It's like nobody at the family reunion wants to talk to you about your job. We're all lined up to talk to cousin Brian, the exorcist.
It does kind of make you
in a long shadow, and it's got like a black hat on. It looks probably like the shadow of like the dude
baby.
from Poltergeist or something. The old man that's like it's kind of like Joe Biden.
Yeah. You know, Joe Biden does look a little bit like that guy in Poltergeist. The Poltergeist 2. Yeah, he does. He does.
About the same age.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. And probably about as healthy too.
That old man scared the hell when I was a kid.
Yeah, that was a freaky actor. I mean, he was dying when he did that role. That actor was dying when that role when he did that.
He had cancer, I believe. Yeah,
stomach cancer.
Joe Biden?
No, the actor.
It seems like he's dying and what he's doing is a role.
Well, he doesn't look healthy. I mean, I don't know what his real health is, but I mean, he doesn't appear healthy to me, but you know.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows?
Yeah, they were saving all of that children's blood to give out at Obama's birthday the other day. So his supply of it.
That's a whole nother show, isn't it?
He's got a
adrenochrome thing.
The adrenochrome.
True Blood crap that was like promotional HBO stunts. They've just got Joe drinking that.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, maybe I'll give him another 100 years. But yeah, so Tony, you know, you went to you were a student at FSU.
I was a student at FSU,
and you were
2003 to 2006.
Okay, so that was the time frame, and so this building that you lived in it.
I lived in it. I was an RA.
Okay. Oh, an RA. Okay.
There.
Okay.
So I worked there for 3 years, and I was an RA for the first year. I'm gonna have to give you like so much exposition to
go right ahead.
Get you where we'll need to be for me to explain these things.
Yeah, sure.
So I was an RA for the first year, and then I got promoted to the resident director which is like basically the head RA who tells everyone you need to make a bulletin board and plan events for the residents and set up who lives in what room and just stuff like that. It's like a RA plus.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so, so this place is called Southgate Campus Center, and it's still there. And it sits at 675 West Jefferson Street, which is right on the corner of Jefferson Street and Pensacola Street.
Okay.
And so the Chi Omega house is like, it's right next door to it. There's like a fence. It's just, they sit on the same corner. Southgate, if I have to describe it, it's like it looks like an hourglass.
Okay.
But like turned to the side. So it was like an L, but within it, it was kind of like an hourglass. And there were, and the thing about it is, this is the weird thing, is it never occurred to me to put two and two together that Ted Bundy killed those gals on the same property, because I think I didn't, that never occurred to me until after that we were on the same land, because you just assume in your mind that like when those girls were killed there, like, you know, first thing you do is like, yeah, we're disbanding this organization.
Right.
But if you don't do that, you at least move to a new location.
You would think.
You would think, but
I don't want my daughter coming to me saying I'm going to be part of this sorority, and then my light bulb goes off, and I'm like, no, no, you're not.
Yeah, right.
And so the whole time it was on the same property.
Okay.
And so I got the job as an RA during the summertime before the school. And if you don't know about Tallahassee, it's like the government's there,
right?
The state government, and then it's three schools. It's Tallahassee Community College, which a lot of people from out of town come to.
Right.
You got Florida State and FAMU. So in the summer, I would say 85% of the population of that city just leaves. Kids going home.
Yeah.
The whole town's empty.
Right.
You know, especially the dorm. And so I got this job there, and it seemed to me that throughout my time there, I would have residents that would say, "Oh, something scary happened." You know, it's kind of your job to just be like, "Oh, well, you know, 600 plus people live in this building." It's during the school year, so much is explainable,
right?
You know, because you have 600 people, everything's explainable. But during the summer, the building's empty except for 8 resident advisors.
Okay.
That's it.
Right.
That was always when the insane stuff happened. And so you show up and you meet my coworkers and all of this, and you get close really quickly with these people, because not only are you just all alone there with them, and there's all of their friends have gone home, but you live together, it's communal. And on top of that, you're all the type of people who can get a job as an RA, which means you can just talk to anyone.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So we all got close quick. You know, it's a certain type of person that can be an RA, you know, and we were all that type of person. So we got close quick. And I remember one of my coworkers, I probably shouldn't say any names because these people, a lot of them have accomplished things. There's one in government in Washington, D.C. There's one who's in government in Jacksonville.
Maybe initials.
There's
then.
Therapists, all kind of people that aren't stand-up comedians.
Right.
They all accomplish things, and I'm a comedian. But so there was one of my coworkers, and it turned out she was in Chi Omega.
Okay.
And it's a certain type of person that joins a fraternity or a sorority. You know what I mean? There's like multiple types of people. The people who it's for future networking and stuff like that, which I don't even know how that works, other than if someone tells you that they were in your same fraternity somewhere else. It's like, we both have HPV. You know, It's that, or people who moved away to college and don't know anyone. It's a quick way to get friends.
Right, of course.
But mainly it's just people who are like, how can I become a whore at this place the fastest? Top tier. And that's who it is. But every once in a while, you'll meet someone who's in one, and it's like, how are you in a fraternity, or how are you in a sorority? You're just, that's not who you are. And it just so happened that was this girl that I worked with.
Okay.
So I had dated girls in sororities, and they just wouldn't tell you anything. You ask them, you know, it was kind of a thing where it's like, oh, I'll get her to tell me. I'll get her to tell me, you know, or whatever. And she just never would.
Right.
Like it's some secret that matters.
Right.
But the girl I worked with was just down to talk about all of it. And I, of course, I'm the person who's like, do you have any ghost stories? Do you have any ghost stories? Whatever. And she said, I'm in Chi Omega. And I was like, what's that about? You know? And dude, I wish I would have written more of it down. Like I've had several times in my life where someone will tell me something and I'm like, ooh, that's super interesting. And I wish that I would have like cataloged it better. Let me turn on a light real quick.
Yeah, sure. It's always,
and
yeah.
I wish I would have cataloged it better. And this was the ultimate case of that, because she told me just all of this stuff, which their whole little symbol, all the sororities have symbols. Theirs is a skull and crossbones. So it's not like this is something that they are wanting to leave in the past. They have fully like embraced
it.
What happened. And the only thing that I remember for a fact is that she said when she got initiated, they had to go into one of the rooms and it was black with candles, and they had to get in coffins, which is just some straight up skull and bones.
It sounds like it.
And I was in a different part of my life where that was just, I didn't understand that is black magic.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you're doing black magic, witchcraft. And I was in a place in my life, I was like, how stupid, like whatever, you know, it just seems like some college prank, you know, where you hear about the fraternity brothers who have to do the thing where they walk and hold their wieners and put their fingers in their butts, or the elephant crawl, or whatever it's called. And you're just like, oh, stupid college. But then you're like, no, that's a humiliation ritual.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm just in a different spot in my life.
Right.
And so in hindsight, they were doing witchcraft in the house where one of the most prolific, famous serial killers killed two of their sisters. It's very dark. It's very dark stuff.
Yeah.
And she just told me about it. I think that she's the type of person who I just can't imagine who is in situations like that and does things like that. And then down the road, they're like, whoa, I was doing witchcraft, you know?
Yes.
And so this was taking place on the same spot of land that we were.
Right.
You know, and I never put two and two together with that. But things happened in that building. And I believe everybody has a story.
Yeah.
I can tell you mine.
That's what I'm really curious. I mean, I'm curious to see what was your, I mean, I'd like to hear what you've heard other people say too, but I'd really be curious to know what was your direct experience.
Okay. I will happy to tell you those. So I have a lot of them, but I have several that were meaningful. The first thing that happened, there are things that you do in a dorm over the summer. If you're an RA, there's a reason that you're there. The first thing that happens when the students leave and you're an RA is you go and you clean out the rooms. Now we are, this is one of the most expensive places to live in Tallahassee. It's technically off campus, but it's closer to the school than most on-campus dorms are. It's just right across the street.
Right.
It's great, but it is expensive. It's all like super rich kids from South Florida. I had a dad pay with a black card. That was the first time I saw one of those.
Oh, the American Express black card. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
like it's a titanium, like it's heavy,
It's
right?
heavy.
Yeah, they're heavy.
And
yeah.
he was a lobbyist in the government there, and he was like, yeah, just pay the whole year now. And it's just, I was so blessed to get to live there because it's so expensive. And I dealt with a lot of weird things there on just like, you're going to have to do a whole lot to me for me to give up getting out of college, not up to debt to my eyeballs.
Yeah.
You'll deal with a lot.
Yeah.
And the thing about it, so you would clean these rooms, and the way that they would leave them was just so gross. These kids have so much money, just the crap that they would leave behind. Just like a dorm room refrigerator, they don't give a crap.
Yeah.
Dad will just buy them a new one. It's gross inside, so they leave it.
Right.
Or I found a Seiko Kinetic watch there that someone just left, and you'd find all kinds of things at the end of the year, and they didn't give crap. They're like, take whatever you want. If someone comes back and asks for it, you got to give it to them.
Yeah.
But so we accrued all kinds of things that these rich kids left to buy. I will tell you, I'm sorry to get sidetracked. I'm a talker.
No, you're fine.
I will tell you something. This is a fact for all of your listeners. This is something I learned there cleaning up after these kids. By and large, men are grosser than women. Men are so much grosser than women. But the women that are gross
are worse than the men.
10,000, dude. I'm talking about just like petrified chunks, petrified period chunks like on the floor of the bed. I'm talking about disgusting.
Dude, you should have been a teenager working at McDonald's and
You
women Saturday night.
Be ashamed of yourself. So just want to point that out. Women, y'all are great, but the ones who ain't are just the worst.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. I'm sorry the camera was on you, Mary, when I said that. That wasn't a dig. I'm sure you're a super tidy person. Anyway.
You got that right.
Getting back to where I was at in the story. So the first thing that happened for me that was weird, I found this alarm clock. And it wasn't anything like, it didn't look ancient or anything like that. But it was blue and had a silver back on it and had giant red letters on it. And it was just odd that this thing would go off at very weird times. I honestly can't think of any particular set of circumstances other than one time when I turned it off and turned off the alarm on it completely and started to walk away and something, and it just went off. It would just go off on weird times where it was make my skin crawl.
Yeah.
Now, I only tell you that just to tell you that was the first time that I felt spooked in this place. And then I got progressively strange. So another reason that there are RAs there during the summer is because they have camps for kids there. So like if you have a kid and they go away to tennis camp or a band camp, or we had a Native American kid camp, and let me just tell you, those kids were terrible. Them were horrible kids. They were like lighting fires and stuff. But here's the thing: all of them they were white. You know what I mean by that? Like you're in Georgia, you know that type of white trash person who's like says they're Native American. They're just like, man, I'm so white, I ain't even white. It was the type of, those kids were terrible. Well, all of the counselors were real Native American people, so they just had to deal with these bad white kids who were like drinking and doing drugs and like in middle school. And the counselors, they all sleepwalk, that was weird. I don't know if that had anything to do with ghosts or them being Native American, but a lot of them were sleepwalkers. That's never mind.
Well, sleep disorders are a part of paranormal disturbances, so it's possible that had something to do with it.
You were going to say would be a Native American.
No, not Native American.
Yeah,
but it was just the Native American people.
Kids.
Well, but
just the Native American people.
Native American people tend to be more spiritually connected, so it's possible they may be more sensitive to it than just an average, Caucasian American would be.
Several of them were sleepwalking, and I'd have to walk around the building when these camps were here and make sure everything at weird hours, make sure everything's going around. I walked into several sleepwalking Native Americans. Dude, you ain't ever been so scared. Think you're in a Kubrick movie. Then when you're walking down some long hallway and there's just some Native American man who's sleepwalking in his underwear, man, that's scary. And their balance is good. It was cinematic.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was. I never assumed that was connected to anything going on there, but now that you mentioned it, it might have been, because it scared the living crap out of me.
We do see that in some genuine cases. Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like I'm going on a Native American tirade, but I love them.
Yeah.
I'm quarter Porch Creek too on my redneck uncle's side. But anyway, so these camps would come and they would stay there at the dorm, and we would have to set up bunk beds. Because if your kid goes to tennis camp and it's at Florida State, they rent out dorm rooms, and that's where your kid stays because there's cafeteria downstairs and all that stuff.
Right.
So we got downstairs I should have described this before. Downstairs is just like the front desk, elevators that go up to the rooms, a cafeteria, and a ballroom where we have events and stuff like that, and then there's a basement, and I'll get to the basement, but the floors were 2, 3, 4, and 5. And each one of those had 67 rooms on each floor. And so 2, 3, 4, and 5, during the summer, they'd rent out different quadrants to different camps, and then we'd go weeks without camps being there. But whenever a camp was coming to stay for a week, the RAs, we would have to meet in the afternoons and set up bunk beds in the room so they could fit 4 kids into each room instead of 2. Mm-hmm. So my first year there, I was taking a class, because why wouldn't you if you're going to be there, for the summer? And my boss, this was before I was the head RA. He was the head RA. We would meet at 4 p.m. to start setting these up. We worked for 4 to 7 for a couple days, and it'd be ready for when these kids came to town. And one day, my boss, before I went to class, I got out at 4:15 or something. So I was going to be late, and I told him, and he said, when you come up, go to the 3rd floor. We're going to be working on the 3rd floor on the left wing. That's rooms 1 through 17 on the 3rd floor. And I remember this like it was yesterday, man.
Yeah.
And so I got out of class and I went up there, and like I said, it was like an hourglass. This was the first side and the other side. And there was a base at the hourglass. So at the end of the hallway, you could turn a left, and there were 2 rooms right there, but it was a dead end, and then it just dead ended to the left. Right. Mm-hmm. So I got out of class, wasn't thinking much. And I went up to the floor, and I was walking down the hall, and as clear as day, I saw my coworker, Joey, walking down the hall, and he turned to left to go into room 311 was the room. Yeah. And so I just walked into room 311, and no one was in there. I looked in the bathroom, looked in the shower, and no one was in there. So I was like, well, maybe he went in 310, because that's right there. Went in there, no one in there. And man, when I tell you that this happened, it wasn't, there's so many things that are explainable, and you're like, well, I just, maybe I wasn't paying attention. I was paying attention. And I saw this dude turn a left to go into that room, and I walked in, and no one was in there. I don't want to cuss, but this scared the shit out of me, and there's no other word for it. I mean, I can't express just how it just stopped me in my tracks.
Sure, yeah, I can imagine it would.
And that is when it started. And so I called my boss and I was like, hey, where are you at? And he's like, oh, dude, we decided to move him to the 5th floor. Come up here. We're working up there. And I went upstairs and I was like, Joey, were you just on the 3rd floor? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Whatever. And from then on, I started asking questions, not to like my boss or anything, but other people. I just it wasn't even so much asking questions as like joking about, oh, this place is haunted. It just became a joke. Oh, there's a ghost up there. Be careful, whatever. And then it started coming around that other people had weird experiences. So I don't remember how, but we started calling this thing Lulu. And that is what we referred to it as for the rest of the time that I lived there. And if you can contact these people that are reputable, one is a producer for Broadway shows and one works in the government. And if you call them and ask them, they will verify all of it. These are not insane people.
Right.
And that is when that's when it got real weird. Yeah. Once you, I don't want to say invited in, but once
you acknowledged it.
Acknowledged it, but jokingly, but gave it a name.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Just kind of validated it.
I mean, honestly, that's what we invited it into our lives. And it wasn't an all the time thing. But we talked about it a lot. And I think between all of us, there was stuff happening a lot.
Yeah.
And, but it was the alarm clock thing it just scared me. And I got rid of the alarm clock. Then after it, when we started joking about it, is when it got like, after that, during the school year, residents would say stuff about it. And I don't know how y'all feel about like that. Can you invite something into other people's lives or whatever? But it was like, there were Jewish girls putting crosses up in their room. That is not a joke.
Yeah, I've seen it. We are talking with Tony about his experiences here with FSU when he was over there at FSU and living right in close proximity to where all of the FSU murders from Ted Bundy took place. And he had some, has had some very disturbing experiences, and we're going to take a break here and find out more. So don't go away.
Although it's hard, I know I gotta keep up. No time to lay to drift away. I fill my space, I spend my time down the rabbit hole again. And as I fall, I can feel the pain. You can't tell me where to go, so I don't know, I just go with the flow. I go with the flow. I'm falling up, I'm falling down, from the sky and from the ground. Up above just like below, and I don't know where I should go. I'm out of love, but I guess I deserved it. Trying to hide, to pass you by. I'm getting tired, feeling fine. I'm light as air, no one can reach me. Lost in a dream, lost in between. Let's keep on flying, let's keep on breathing. I'm falling up, I'm falling down, from the sky and from the ground. Up above just like below, and I don't know where I should go. stuck in limbo.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second half of Vestiges After Dark. We are talking about traumatic hauntings, particularly the hauntings that our guest tonight, Tony Burkett, experienced while living at FSU, where Ted Bundy committed his murders there. And we were just leaving off at the break where it looked like there was some acknowledgement of the disturbances there. And when we return here in just a moment, we're going to talk more about that, particularly what those metaphysical ramifications might be and what not to do when faced with these kinds of disturbances. So don't go away. Well, Tony, when we were leaving off there, you were asking about what kind of possibilities there might be when you're dealing with a haunting, or, you know, if you acknowledge it or if you give it a name, you know, could there be ramifications for that, and that could have consequences to exciting the energy and making it worse. And I certainly would say that it absolutely does. As Joy Keeling pointed out in the chat room, when you name a thing metaphysically, you give that thing power. It's also related very much to the rite of exorcism, where a big part of the solemn rite is to get the demon's name, because once we have that information, we have some power over it. We have a unique power over it, actually, one that allows us to then proceed to the next step, which will be removal of the disturbance. And if we're successful, then, you know, that's the essential part there, is to be able to identify that energy. But there is a naming process in occultism that transcends. It's a type of personification, actually. It's a law of personification, sort of transcends all of the archetypal influences and traditions around the world. So names are powerful, and even if you're doing it in a joking way, it can still have the same metaphysical effect as if you were doing it seriously. But then when you combine the fact that you had the murders that we know happened there, and then we have also people practicing dark rituals, that's like a superstorm of really a really bad situation that would absolutely agitate the entire environment and make it so much worse. So it's really hard to know exactly what's going on there, but it looks like it's left an imprint. The murders perhaps have left an imprint in that spot. That have now receded into the future, and under the influences of all these other things that continue to take place there. So I guess I'll just let you continue from where you left off before the break.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. We'll have to continue in a minute, because you probably shouldn't have taken a break on this episode, because it just gave me time to think about more questions I want to ask you about ghost adventures.
Go right ahead. The second half is all about taking questions. Yeah, go ahead.
This is my one shot, to ask you why do they only do the investigations at night with the lights turned out in there? You know what I mean? Like,
that's most paranormal shows.
Yeah, and I think
there ain't no vestiges in the afternoon.
I think what it is vestiges in the afternoon. I think what it is it comes back to there's a few things. There's a practical reasons. I mean, there's dramatic reasons. Obviously, things are scarier at night. So if you're doing a show that has dramatic and entertainment value, which, I mean, obviously these shows are being put on the air because they're fun to watch. So there's a certain aura that nighttime produces to make the show scarier. So, I mean, that's just, I think, a dramatic decision on that part. But that's not really why Zach does it. Even if he had no show, he'd still be investigating at night. And part of the reason for that is twofold. One, the equipment is responsive in the dark far better than when it's daylight. So if you're using like an infrared camera, for example, you want to be in pitch dark to be able to capture anomalies. If there's sun coming through, it's going to interfere with what you're going to be able to capture, and you're going to be more limited with what you could see. The other thing is that for whatever reason, I have some theories on this, but for whatever reason, paranormal activity is much more prolific at night than it is during the day. And maybe that's because the rest of the world is quieter, and that gives that side of the cosmos an opportunity to now take the stage. I don't know exactly for sure why that is. But typically the closer you get to 3 o'clock in the morning, the stronger that activity gets, and then it slowly recedes after 3 a.m.
Well, also your senses are keener at night as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's like some evolutionary type.
Yeah, that's a defense thing.
I think
right.
so. Father Chris Yates from Australia has joined us tonight, and he also is an exorcist and does the work that I do, only out in Australia instead of.
So you get to meet two, Tony.
Yeah, you get to meet two exorcists
that's
tonight.
Like super crazy.
It's double jeopardy. It's double jeopardy for you, Tony. But Father,
well, he doesn't have anything better to do right now since they're under martial law.
No, we're all locked down. That's right.
Yeah,
we're
all being imprisoned.
I can, Father Chris, you should have closed the shades. I can see the bars, gleaming through on the reflection on the wall behind you. Yeah.
It's true.
Hey, will you say, "Oh no," like something's coming at you?
Well, one of the problems is that I have an English accent because I'm actually from England, but I moved to Australia 10 years ago. So there you go.
All right. Well.
They sent him to the penal colony.
That's right.
Uh-oh.
It's living up to its original purpose at the moment.
Right.
Yeah,
It
no
is.
kidding.
It is.
Unfortunately.
They always had this intent, I think. They always knew, we're going to keep it penal colony. We're just not going to tell anyone until the year 2020.
Right. It was an open prison, and now it's not.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, do you wait to do exorcisms at night, or do you do it during the day?
I mean, I do them whenever it's convenient, really. I mean,
when is it
both.
convenient to do an exorcism? You're like, hey, devil, I got an opening at 4. If that works for you, devil.
Well, the best place to do it is in the church, and that most are done in the church, or at least in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. But obviously, sometimes that can't be the case, and it depends. If it's a person, that is. If it's a place, then obviously you've got to go to the place. So, either I've done them in the day or in the night. And in fact, what Bishop Brian says is right. It is normally between midnight and 3. I mean, and the connection there is our Lord was hung at midday. Yeah, and died at 3, and so it's the reverse of that time. But actually, the most energetic response I've had from a place has been in the day. I think it was at 5:30 p.m. So
our toughest exorcism was in the middle of the day too. You know which one I'm talking about, Bishop?
Oh yeah. We've done them during the day,
and then one was at night at dusk, and then the other one I think was during the day.
Yeah.
Lord, I don't know, man. Do y'all ever see someone and you can just tell they got a demon in them, like just walking down the street? Is it that type of thing, or somebody's like, if somebody got to contact you and be like,
no, you can definitely start to see. You can definitely start to see something the longer you do this work.
Oh yeah.
Right. A lot of times they'll react to you as you're walking by, and you don't even have to engage in them. Yeah.
Oh, I've had a person.
Tony, also through normal interactions.
Right.
I have had people literally walk into the church from the street who have said, "I've got a problem," and they have. but also just through doing the occasional offices, the baptisms, weddings. You know, people, especially in this day and age and in Australia, people don't know the church, they don't know priests. So if they meet one, they go, actually, I've got this issue, you know. And so, yeah, it's kind of like normal business, really. It's far more prevalent than people realize.
Tony, I was
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like we're so overstimulated with all that's going on around us, not just phones, internet, video games, stuff like that, that there's like a lot going on that we're like, don't realize, you know?
That's exactly what it is. Really, we are so distracted and we have divorced ourselves so much from our spiritual center that we are not connected to these things. So now it feels like it's superstition or delusional or just imagination, but not real. People have lost their connection to finding the realism of spirituality and how much it actually does impact our lives. Getting back to your question, I was about to say, you know, I was at a mall once, and my wife and son had gone off to a store, and I went over to get some chocolate while I waited for them, and I'm sitting there, you know, stuffing my face with Godiva truffles when I noticed a family walking by with you know, two little kids, and they're married, and everything's completely normal about it, when suddenly you know, they just stop and they're just kind of sitting there talking, and then suddenly the mother just goes completely still and then turns her head slowly, looks at me, never made eye contact prior to this, didn't see me, you know, I was completely across a very large part of the mall. I could see them off in the distance, but I don't doubt they would have noticed that I was even noticing that they were there. And all of a sudden I see her head turn, look at me. And then she darts off like a bat out of hell at me, gets right up into my face with her finger and says, "I don't like you." And just stays there for about 2 seconds, turns around, goes back to her family, and no, she turns around, goes back to her family, and completely normal again.
Nothing happened. Yeah.
Nothing happened. Yeah.
So weird.
Yeah. I've had that happen. That was the worst one, but I've had similar things happen to me all my life, but much more so now that I have been doing this kind of work.
You mentioned your son. You ever take your kid to work day?
He's helped with when we do investigations of objects. He'll sometimes help, particularly if it's a child's toy that is allegedly haunted. He can sometimes help bring out a shy child ghost, one that might not talk to us, but one that feels comfortable talking to him. We've had that where he was very helpful to be able to make the connection. Because once we can make the connection, if it's just a ghost and not a demonic thing or some kind of malevolent elemental energy, then all we need to do is make the connection, and then we can send them on their way. I guess the vernacular term now in the metaphysical world is crossing over, but I guess that's as good a term as any. But you know, we in the church we'd probably say we put them at peace. We put them to rest.
Well, see, as far as ghosts go, I have very strong opinions on that, because in my life, on more than one occasion, I've lived in a place where I know that there was something in there. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I always felt like it wasn't trying to reveal itself to me. Like it revealed itself on accident.
Right.
Because I mean, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but me and my wife, we're pretty interesting people. Yeah. You know what I mean? I don't want to throw around the word entertaining all cavalierly, but we're both stand-up comedians. Like, I'm just saying, like, if I'm like, I am trapped in this place for eternity on account of my husband chopped my head off with a Ouija board, it's like, you could do worse than me and my wife. It's like they have good conversations. They watch great shows. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. I noticed on these shows where like these folks who are at the point where you're like, and bringing in TV crews to help me get the thing out of my house. It's never someone that you see him and you're like, oh, he seems like a cool guy to hang out with. No, it's always some dude like who, if he was at your house for a week, you'd just be like, man, you get out. In Jesus' name.
Yeah.
Get out of my house. You know what I'm saying? I feel like ghosts are out there, but it's like they only mess with just annoying people.
I mean, I think it tends to be people that are able to be aware of them. I think most of the time there are cases where people can live in close proximity to paranormal activity and never even realize that it's happening. It's only people that are sensitive for whatever reason. And yeah, I think sometimes annoying people are annoying because they are overly sensitive. That can actually be a precursor to or proclivity towards having those kinds of things. I think, Tony, there's a call coming in from Florida. Would you like to take it? I think that might be a question for you. Let's see what they have to say. But calling in from the 850 area code in Florida. Hello, you're on the air.
Would you like? I think that might be.
Hey, caller, go ahead and turn down your radio so we can hear you.
Hey, I just turned it down. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, great. Hey, my name's Kirby. I'm from Alabama, Birmingham area. I just want to call and ask. It's kind of like a two-part question. Like during the exorcism. Like, is there ever a threat that whenever the demon has exited the body, that maybe it could enter someone else in the room? And second part of that is, what if there's an inanimate object? But you actually mentioned that while I was waiting on hold. Like, if there's a ghost in a doll, like, could it go in there? That's what I was wondering about.
Yeah, and that's a great question, actually, because it's something that I think the movies have really, for dramatic effect, have made that part of the exorcism genre of television. So, the expectation there, I think even the movie, The Exorcist, the end scene really dealt with that very phenomenon. Is there a risk there? And the reality of it is that there's always a risk when one is in close proximity to something that is that malevolent, something that really qualifies as being an actual demon, which in the church we would refer to that as a fallen angel. There's always a risk that anybody else in the proximity to that demon could also fall under the attachment. But it doesn't typically happen. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, as Father Chris Yates pointed out, we tend to do this on holy ground when possible. Right. That's one of the reasons why we do it on holy ground, because it weakens the demon. But the rites of exorcism, even if it weren't to be possible to be done inside a church or on holy ground, the rites of exorcism themselves is already wearing the demon down to a point where they're not in a position to be able to go and reattach to something. It's not really accurate to think of it as the exorcist casting a demon out. That's not really what's happening. What's really happening is the exorcist is dissolving that energy. Mm-hmm. Think of it more like a dissolution rather than casting out, because casting out sounds like you're just taking it out and then it's free to go anywhere else it wants to go. And we get that in the scriptures, of course, because Jesus did that with the pigs. But that was a very different kind of situation. And I think that had more to do with making a point than it had to do with, any kind of practical reason for let's go and possess pigs now. That was a very different matter. But in an actual situation, what we would see with a truly possessed person, we go in there and we want to actually, liberate this person from the effects of that demonic energy. We're working on dissolving it by making it so weak that eventually it no longer has any substance and it's gone. The problem is that demons are fractures of divine energy that have been seriously bastardized by the nature of evil. So, there's a countless number here. So you could get rid of one, and there's two or three that could easily take its place. So it's always very important to not just weaken the demon, but constantly strengthen the person who's serving as the host to that demon, and that is done through the sacrament. So typically, I don't even start the rite of exorcism until I have at least performed unction. I want that body completely anointed, and if they don't let me do the full rite of unction, I will douse them in chrism. I will.
He's done it. Trust me.
Yes. I mean, I know that's a little bit unorthodox to do that, but it is, I find it very effective. Chrism is an extremely powerful holy oil against demonic forces. And I don't think the church really uses it as often as it really should. So these are little things that we can do to strengthen the victim at the same time weakening the demon. And so there's very little risk, but it is really probably for the best as a precautionary measure that we have a limited number of people present during an exorcism, just so that there is, you never know the spiritual health of anybody that you meet. Only you really know
who you're letting in the room.
Exactly. And so hopefully
they're usually warned ahead of time.
Exactly. And so hopefully the clergy are spiritually strong, and they've been cultivating their faith and being able to build
unvaccinated.
Well, I'm sure some of them are. Some of them probably have gone for the vaccine. But spiritually, what's more important is that we have spiritual vaccination, and that's the Eucharist, and that tends to generally protect us against things like demonic attack. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that a person who is a loyal churchgoer and receives the Eucharist every day, let's say, goes to every single mass of every day, that doesn't mean they cannot come under demonic attack that could escalate all the way to the point of possession. It is possible. It's unlikely, but it is possible, because evil is such that it is always being reverse manipulated by the divine, so think about Judas. The best example is Judas. Okay. Here is this individual that the church has never said he's in hell, but the implications are strong. He's got, he committed suicide right before being possessed by a demon and then betraying Jesus Christ. All three things are pretty condemnable. Now, no one knows his heart. No one but he and God can really decide where Judas is. So the church has never declared that Judas is in hell. In fact, the church has never said anyone's in hell. It just acknowledges that hell exists, but it only acknowledges that people are in heaven. It will only declare this person's in heaven. That's the canonization of saints. It will never say so-and-so went to hell, even Judas. So the fact of the matter is, though, Judas is a perfect example of how somebody's evil actions were reverse engineered by God to lead to the events that are essential to the soteriology of the Christian religion, which is what leads to salvation. It's kind of like Adam and Eve in happy fault. Without Adam and Eve's original sin, which condemns us all to death, we would have never developed the relationship with Jesus that leads us all to life. Adam and Eve were largely ignorant to any kind of relationship to God that now we as Christians can enjoy. It takes the fall in order to and be restored from that fall in order to build the relationship. So, that the church calls that happy fault. But it also, everything that evil does is part, eventually, it has to succumb to the will of God. So even though it thinks it gets an upper hand here and there, and it sometimes does, in the end, it will always end up resulting in the ultimate good. And that's something I think we always have to remember, that we tend to completely forget, particularly when things are really bad. But
I believe that.
Yeah,
I really do.
Yeah. I think it's important to believe that. I think it's important to always remind ourselves of that. Now, to the caller's second question, we also have, the idea of a possessed object. Okay. The dolls are the big thing. The Annabelle, obviously Annabelle's the big one, but there's a lot of haunted objects. Chucky. Yeah, Chucky is, I guess, a fictitious example of a haunted doll.
Dude, it's based off of this thing called Robert the Doll.
That's true. Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. I mean, it is based on that. And yes, these things are attached. There's obviously an entity, usually malevolent in these kinds of cases, that is attached. But it isn't possession like it is for a human being. It is basically the effigy that it becomes that develops the attachment. So the energy, basically, I mean, really, a demon can attach to anything. Attach to a rock. And it does. I mean, we've had not necessarily a demon, but we've had a very difficult spirit, one that was identified by the native tribes of Hawaii, where there's these sacred lava rocks that are not supposed to be disturbed, but tourists will sometimes go to these sacred places and take these rocks back with them. And then when that happens, they suddenly find themselves to be under what they can only describe as a curse.
Obviously never watched that Brady Bunch episode.
What was it? Taboo, right? The little taboo.
Right.
Yeah, the little taboo.
Yeah.
I have one over here from Hawaii, actually. I'll show it to you. But yes, it is. That is an example of a spiritual energy that is attached to an object, that when a person removes that object, it excites the energy, it disturbs the energy, and now that energy can come and have a negative or adverse effect on the person who got involved with it. So that's basically what happens with the dolls. It's not really possession in the same sense that what we would see with human beings. So we wouldn't say a doll's possessed, although they do tend to use that term in the vernacular.
Yeah.
It's an attachment.
It's an attachment.
That's good to know, because just as a rule of thumb, dude, I just always about be nice to toys. I've always been like that because of the whole haunted things. I remember when my nephew was a little baby, he had this Elmo
Oh yeah.
toy that he loved so much.
Yeah.
And my sister, when she'd clean it, she'd throw that thing all around, and I'd find myself being like nice to it. Just, you remember me.
Yeah.
Come
They have
alive,
spirits of
you
their own.
remember me. I was good to you.
Yeah.
If in case they came alive and killed everyone, I felt like he would spare me.
Well, the other side to that coin, too, is that energy can be projected intelligently, and it can become sentient automatically. It's a type of natural thought form, and this is something that our brains are just capable, our minds really are just capable of producing. So a child who puts a lot of love into an object, like a stuffed animal or a toy or a doll, and then cares for that doll as though it is the doll's mother. You know, you see this sometimes with little girls and their dolls. And I mean, I know I had a bunch of stuffed animals when I was a boy, and I mean, they were the world to me. I used to have nightmares about, you know, what would happen if there was a fire in the house and they all burned down. You know, if I lost them all in the fire, I would have struggled with that. I've always had sort of a soft spot for stuffed animals because I was so connected to them. But I do also recognize that when a child is that connected and puts that much energy and love into an object, that love becomes sentient, and the object starts to respond as a real thing. The thought form gets attached to the toy, and then the toy animates. I have seen my stuffed animals move. I've seen them walk around. I've seen them do these things, and it wasn't childhood imagination, because I have, as an adult and doing investigations, I have witnessed even toys in my home today. At the age I'm at now, I've seen them move. I've seen them change their facial expressions. I've shown Sister Mary Joan pictures of one of our.
That was creepy.
It happens. So most of these attachments to dolls are not really demons. They're not really even elementals. They're thought forms that the person's love gets projected into. And you say, well, why would they become malevolent then if it's based on love, if it was born of love? Here's why. Because eventually what happens is that the child grows up and the toy no longer gets the nourishment of love that the toy enjoyed when the child was caring for it. And so as the doll becomes abandoned later in life, or the toy or the stuffed animal, whatever the object is, that energy will respond just as a human being would to the neglect. And it becomes despondent, and then bitter, and then angry, and then it can act out negatively. Not always, but sometimes it does. And that's 99.9% of all haunted dolls and objects. They're not really entities that will jump to another person. They are confined to the object in question, and they are typically responding to neglect, just like a human being would.
Dude, that's crazy. Y'all need to get rid of your old toys if you ain't playing with them.
Well,
Give them to some kid who'll play with them.
That's really good. Or just make sure that you take good care of them. Now, I've never known anybody that, that properly cared for them and didn't just like toss them aside or throw them out in the trash or, just donate them to some location, but it just never gets picked up or cared for, but just thrown in the basement perhaps. I've never known anyone that has actually kept good care of them to have this problem. It's typically only when the doll was really, really loved and then instantly neglected when the person grew up. That's typically the only thing we see.
Well, I got 2 more questions for y'all, if that's cool, and then we can move the whole Florida State story.
We can, and you know what? You know what, Tony? If you've got the time, I don't mind being here another hour. We can extend the show.
Yeah.
Okay.
I cleared my whole schedule for this.
All right, that's fine. We can go up to 3 hours, so that's fine.
All right. Well, I got
2 questions on the chat too.
I got. Well, you can do the chat first, or I can ask whatever. However, it's your deal.
Well, this is it's a Ted Bundy question, so maybe I will segue into it. From Riverboat Gambler, referenced Ted Bundy. Earlier, there was some insinuation that he may have been possessed. Do you think that he may have been, or was he an intelligent sociopath? I don't play that card.
I don't know if there's
Danny.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a difference. I don't know if there's a difference between the two.
He's both, in my opinion. He was both.
Well, it doesn't reduce his crime. I mean,
right?
Demons can possess people, but they can't make us sin. Right. They can't control our will.
They can manipulate you, but you make that decision.
They can influence us, but we have to. If we cooperate, we cooperate. And so, I think. I'm always a bit cautious about the whole. The classic one. The Godwin scenario is Hitler. Is Hitler possessed? And I think one of the dangers of speaking in that way, even that, is actually to underestimate the ability of any human being to be evil. In a way, we want to sort of give ourselves a get out of jail free. I couldn't possibly be that evil. I would have been the one that rebelled. I would have been. We always look back and think we'd have been on the good side of these things, but actually, every human being has that potential. Mm-hmm. But equally, we're created with the potential to be saints. And so I, because if on the one hand we say, oh, well, the devil makes people do these evil things, and it's all the devil, then actually the flip side of that is, well, we can do nothing to contribute to our salvation. And that's not true. So I agree that there's easily could be elements of possession when it comes to Ted Bundy, but that doesn't mean Ted Bundy wasn't responsible for his crimes.
No, and
he made that ultimate decision. He made that overt act.
Well, it gets back to also what I was saying is that the evil has no power that you don't yourself give it. So you are a full complicit contributor to anything that you would do that would be criminal, at the very least criminal in a possessed state. So yes, you are still fully complicit because clearly you have aligned your will to the seductions of this darkness within you, and have allowed it to grow within you. I mean, that makes you fully complicit. Now, that's not to say that there isn't manipulation going on. Of course, that's probably if the devil has any power at all, and I would hesitate to call this a power, but it would be manipulation. The problem with fallen angels is they're hyper intelligent, far more than any human being is. The greatest genius could not outsmart a demon.
Make UFOs.
Maybe it might be where some of them come from. Who knows? I mean,
just picking up on that. I mean, we refer to the temptations of Christ, and classically we think about him in the wilderness and the devil offers him these things.
Right.
But actually, there's an earlier temptation in the gospel, certainly in the Gospel of Mark, which is arguably the earliest gospel, is that he goes to the synagogue, and there's a man possessed by devils, and he and they say, "We know who you are, the Holy One of God," and the response of Jesus is be silent. In other words, because there is authority in names. This was in the chat I was reading earlier on. And so Jesus does two things, really. Number one, he refuses them that authority. They don't. To name him would be an act of authority, and he's saying, no, demons have no authority over me. But the other thing he does is he's resisting the temptation of the devil to be identified amongst people that may worship him with such an identification.
Yeah.
So it's that resisting that temptation of, because what those demons would have been true. That he was the Christ. If he'd have allowed them to speak, it would have been true. But they were saying those true things for a demonic reason, for a negative overall purpose, and it is Macbeth.
Yes.
It's they tell us oftentimes to win us with their charms. The instruments of darkness tell us truths, and so it's that sort of interaction between what sort of authority and what, and therefore what kind of influence do you allow voices from darkness to have over you? Jesus' answer was none.
I would say, honestly, that mental illness is a better defense than demonic possession in terms of, being complicit or culpable, rather, in the crimes that Ted Bundy was responsible for. I would say that, not that it would alleviate any of the punishment that was due him. I think execution, I'm sure a lot of Catholics are going to be up in arms for me saying this, but I think execution was the right course of action with him. I don't have a problem with capital punishment in those circumstances. I think it shouldn't be overused, and I really think it should be an extreme, last resort option for only people that are completely irredeemable. And I think he was. I do. I know the church doesn't like that. The church wants to leave room for everyone to seek redemption. But, at the expense of him getting out again and killing someone else, I don't think it's worth it. Let send him to God and maybe let God deal with it at that point. If we did something wrong, well, as a society, we'll have to answer for that. But overall, I'm glad he's gone. I'm glad he's not in jail where he can get out again, because clearly he was very good at doing that. Yeah. And so I don't really have a problem with him having been executed, because I don't think that there was anything that could be done. But if there was anything that could have reduced his culpability, it would have been mental illness. Certainly not any proclivity towards demonic possession. But I don't honestly think there's much of a difference between the two in those circumstances. I think they become one and the same thing. And then once you understand how I look at demonic possession as an archetypal thing, I think that makes a lot more sense. But when you're looking at it more mystically, like this, entity coming into the person and taking over their body, that's true from a certain point of view, but I think it's more accurate to see it more as the person becomes the archetype that they themselves cultivate within them. So if a person is cultivating that darkness by engaging with it in a way that allows them to be seduced, then yeah, bad things are going to happen. And if you let it go too far. Well, but this Ted Bundy, though, the man was sick, because there were stories that his family told where, I don't remember which family member it was. It might have been a grandmother or an aunt or something. But when he was 3 years old, they woke up. The adult family member woke up surrounded by all of the kitchen knives, and he was standing there at the end of the bed laughing. This was when he was 3. There was something wrong with that guy. Going way back.
Well, his upbringing was screwed up anyway, because he was an illegitimate birth, and he was raised to think that his mother was his sister, and he didn't find out until later on when he was becoming a young adult.
Yeah,
I think that's
his
Garth
sister
Brooks.
was actually his mama.
I think Garth Brooks, that happened to him too. And if you look at him, he's definitely possessed by a demon. Like, if you look at his eyes, dude, get out of here. Look at his eyes. He ain't human. No,
that might be why thou shalt not lie, or thou shalt not bear false witnesses in the 10 Commandments, because lies, as no doubt all of us have experienced personally, as well as from history, lies are deadly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the whole mental illness thing, that actually brings up one of the questions I wanted to ask y'all. Have either of y'all ever had to basically break the news to someone that they're like schizophrenic. Like they come to you and they're like, I need your help. I'm possessed by a demon. And you kind of, crunch the numbers or whatever it is you do. And you determine, you're like, oh no, this person is mentally
most of our cases
unwell.
are mental illness.
Yeah.
Most.
Yeah, I would say most.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to make that distinction though, because, and we've said this on a previous show, but it's also possible that somebody can be mentally ill and possessed.
Right.
Yeah, that's the problem. Well,
This is
I mean,
our
Father Chris,
assessment.
let's be honest. I think that there's always going to be comorbidity there.
both.
I mean, I don't think it's possible to be possessed without there being psychological and emotional ramifications.
Absolutely.
But likewise, I think there has to be some kind of emotional or psychological state of being compromised to allow something as severe as demonic possession to happen. I don't think that someone that is truly strong in their mental capacity, mental faculties, I don't think they're going to be as much at risk. Not that they couldn't be, and they could be weighed down. Any one of us, even the strongest of us, could be worn down by look at life right now. I mean, just the way the world is today, it'd be very easy to surrender to depression because it's a very depressing world right now. I don't care which side of the political spectrum you find yourself on. I think it's pretty depressing for all of us. Maybe we can all find that as the agreement point. And, that can be enough to weaken even a strong person. But I think there's always going to be the comorbidity of demonic possession and mental illness in every single case. I really think, the only time you might not see it is when a person's mentally ill that just has not, for whatever reason, come under the radar of a demonic force. But just because, so much of mental illness puts people in a low frequency state, a vibratory state that is much more closer to the fallen nature, gets us down to that darkness within. Because we all have the darkness within too. See, we carry it around with us everywhere we go. That's the fallen nature.
We had a saying in narcotics, we are all given free will. It's our ethics that restrict us.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't remember where that quote came from, but that's something that they taught us when we were doing undercover school in narcotics.
Well, even if you want
to, you remember where you are, remember where you're from, remember where you come from, remember who you are, because you can get lost. What can you see? So I remember that quote.
I think also to give some hope to people is that the converse is true as well. I mean, probably about 6 weeks, maybe even as many as 3 months ago, I was pretty low. I mean, not depressed, but I know the difference. But not able to travel, can't see my family, all those sorts of things, and it still seems, by the way, that certainly the government here has got no idea of how to manage. But anyway, I don't need to get into politics about it, but because what I want to give is hope. But actually, I don't know, about 3-4 weeks ago, even though nothing has changed about those restrictions and the the negative effects of that, I felt a lot more positive. And
faith comes in.
I have the past 3 days.
Do you know what? And I know it's because people are praying for me. And I attribute it to that. And so, my encouragement to everybody is to actually, and for people who you find the most difficult, people who've damaged me a lot in life, that actually, I know it sounds trite, but I have been praying for them as well. Yeah, and not in the kind of, God show them how wrong they are. Not that kind of prayer.
Yeah.
The sort of willing the goodness for that person. And I think, I happen to think that has coincided with me being involved in this show and having a whole other group of people who I know are praying for me. And so I just want to encourage everybody in that it makes a difference.
It does.
Has an effect.
What you put out there is what you get back, and that's true no matter what religion you belong to. But it can be particularly true when you're talking about the act of blessing, and anyone can bless anyone. The fact of the matter is, there's different types of blessing. What a priest gives is a unique and special kind of operation of the church. But anyone can offer a blessing to another or request a blessing of God for someone else. My bishop used to teach me that one of the most powerful things that we can do, very powerful for a priest, but anyone can do it, is when you're walking down the street in public, and particularly in a busy spot, or like a mall or a store or something, where you're constantly strangers crossing your path. Anytime someone crosses your path, offer a blessing to them. Silently. You don't have to do it publicly, or acknowledge them even. You just look at them, and what I do is I use the Orthodox prayer, "Blessed is our God, always, now, and ever, even unto ages of ages, amen." I offer that constantly. I'll use it almost like a mantra going through the store, and as I see new people, I will offer that blessing to them. And it has a very positive, uplifting effect, not just for them, but also it comes back to you. And it can create good energy that they take with them. So when they go,
that's very Thomas Merton, isn't it? I mean,
it is,
not far away from where you are.
Yeah, right.
I think he was in Kentucky, wasn't he? When he had that realization, he was on a busy street, and he realized that that he loved everybody.
Yeah.
And not in in that kind of divine illumination kind of way of not just realizing that God loved them, but that actually he loved them.
Yeah.
As a result of that relationship. And I mean, look, I lapse and I'm 10 years in law enforcement, made me a natural cynic.
Try 25 and a half.
I know. It was one of the reasons I left, actually. But actually, I don't know. I just wanted to offer that encouragement, and that's that very good reflection from you, Bishop Brian, about willing the good of other people, which is actually what love is. Love is to will the good of another person as other, to acknowledge them as other, not to will their good in order that, they fulfill something that you want for them.
Sure, correct.
But to acknowledge the other as other and will their best. That's what love is. That's what friendship is. Well,
true love is unconditional. And right. I wouldn't call it love. I think that, people always ask me, what's the difference between lust and love? At least in romantic context. And I would say, well, is the love you feel unconditional, or is it to gratify you? If it's to gratify you, then it's probably closer to lust. If it's because you truly want the best for the other, even at the expense of yourself, well, then that's much closer to love. And then I would even say compassion's higher than both of those things. Perhaps compassion could be say is the highest form of love. Maybe that's really the closest human beings can get to agape, that perfect divine state of love, is compassion, and compassion is it can be completely selfless. That's the beauty of it, it doesn't even have to have an emotion attached to it. Love, you feel that one. You don't necessarily feel compassion. Compassion is more of an action that you do. It's a choice that you make. Love, not always. I mean, sometimes you choose to love someone, but most of the time, you just go with whatever your feelings do to you, and that tends to lead you. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. A lot of times they're wrong, because there wouldn't be so much divorce in the world if they were right. But overall, that's kind of what we're talking about here, and the complete antithesis to Ted Bundy. So. Tony, I know you said you had a couple of questions. I didn't want to.
I got one more question.
Go for it.
It can be short. What's the deal? What do y'all think? What's the deal with imaginary friends? Like, kids have imaginary friends. I never had one, but anytime that someone's told me a story, they always creep me out whenever I hear kids talking about their imaginary friends and stuff. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they can be a lot of different things. I think most of the time, statistically, if you were to actually do a study, this is, of course, not a scientific statement, because no one's ever studied this in any, legitimate capacity. But I would say that if I had to venture an educated guess, I'd say that the vast majority of imaginary friends are thought forms of one character or another. Perhaps not enough to take actual form, perhaps not enough to actually affect the phenomenal world, but certainly enough to engage with the psyche of the child to a point that it feels objective and is separate from themselves. It's a type of it's a type of sentience. I mean, it really is. Although it's an extension of their own psyche, but it plays itself out in a way that it feels separate. Now, if that's allowed to continue, or if the child's particularly good at engaging these things, then they can actually truly project those things out, and they become a type of entity. And that's, egregore, tulpa, thought form. You don't need to be an occult practitioner to do that, although occult practitioners do this. Some ceremonial magicians do this with intent, but you can actually do it accidentally. And if a child is got the spiritual inclination to be able to do it, that's when it can actually become a real thing. Now, in the smaller cases, I would say that can sometimes be a spirit manipulating the child. Sometimes that can be because the spirit, it does not know better. And sometimes it can be truly intentional with malevolent intentions. And that would be, again, more in the demonic category as a lead into attachment down the road. If the child is vulnerable enough and doesn't have the various protections that we can afford them, like baptism and life in the church and spiritual growth and a conscious effort to be a good person, at least to have a prayer life. A lot of families aren't teaching those things, they don't really care about those things. So a lot of kids are just left to their own defense devices, and that doesn't necessarily bode well for those who might be most at risk. It's just like the same kinds of risks you'd see in socioeconomic problems. When you see the people that have various risks socially that can lead to a lifetime of drug use or in just all sorts of other kinds of problems.
There's also a massive aversion to data when it comes to assessing the quality of socio-economic programs done by governments.
That's true. That is true. Again, you guys get out of law enforcement. I get out of clinical psychology for very much the same reasons. It's like, well, I'm tired of maintaining people who are sick. I want to heal. I'm a healer type, not a maintainer. And I felt that the only way to really truly heal in psychology was to get into primary prevention, just, go to at-risk children and give them the tools they needed to grow up into being functional adults. And that's what I tried to do. And, the bureaucracy involved in any kind of work like that was so much, and the everything comes down to money in the end. And there's never enough of it to be able to do any good. I just got fed up.
I've always thought there's kind of a binary choice when somebody comes to you and says, I'm not happy with the person I am. One thing is to say, well, how can I make you happier with how much you suck? The other question is, do you suck, and maybe do you want to be healed? They're two different propositions.
They are. We are talking with Father Chris Yates, Sister Mary Joan, and Tony Burkett about evil, really, and kind of leading into Ted Bundy and doing other things. We're going to go on for another hour if everyone's willing. Anyone needs to go, you can go. If you want to stick around, stick around. But we're going to do a third segment here, impromptu, and we'll be right back after this with more from Tony about his experiences at FSU. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to the third segment of Vestiges After Dark. Yes, that's right. We're doing a third hour, special bonus tonight. We're talking with Tony Burkett. We got Father Chris Yates and Sister Mary Joan here. And the discussion continues in just a moment. Don't go away. Oh, welcome back, everyone, to the third segment of Vestiges After Dark. And it's been a great discussion so far. And I just want to say thank you for staying with us through this evening and talking with us and asking your questions in the chat. If you do have a question for us, remember to call in to the show at 347-338-1860. That's 347-338-1860. And enter PIN number 1100999. That's 1100999. You can also try calling us on Skype if you're international, don't want to incur the long-distance phone charges. You can call Eye of the Seer on Skype. That's EYEOFTHESEER. I think we got Skype working. We were having a little bit of a problem before the show, which is what delayed us a little bit when we got started. But I think it's working now. If you want, give it a try, and we'll see if we can take you on. If we can't, well, we'll try next time. Also, I want to give a shout out to the Riverboat Gambler. He is in the chat tonight, and I just want you all to know that if you love Vegas as much as I do, if you enjoy, the games as much as I do, I'm not a prolific gambler by any stretch of the imagination, but I do enjoy games of chance. I do it intelligently. I set a certain amount that I intend to take with me when I go on vacation, and that's what I play. If I lose it all, then it's gone. I don't take more to continue on. That's my vacation expense. Fortunately, I'm really good at gambling, so I always leave with more money than I come back. I've very rarely ever lost money in the course of a vacation. But the reason for that is because I practice all the time with computers. I don't always play the games for actual cash. I just enjoy the operations of the games. And one of the best, perhaps the best game ever made is Riverboat Gambler. It's an app you can get on the iPhone. I think it's even available on Android now. And they've got so many games, all the games that you'd find in the casino, but also games that no longer, are played anymore, like Faro Bank is in there. I love that one. It's a really cool thing. And this is a way that you can practice with the real odds and learn the game with no risk to yourself. So that way, when you go to the casino and you are risking real money, you know what you're doing. You've already played it and you've gotten very familiar with it without any risk to yourself. I love his app and I wish that more people would know about it. So please go to, if you like this kind of thing, if you enjoy this, if you just like to relax at night like I do and you sit at your TV and you just kind of vegetating with a scotch, it's kind of fun to sit there and play. And that's usually what I do on most nights. So that's the Riverboat Gambler. Go ahead and check it out on the Apple Store. But anyway, we were talking before the break about evil and had lots of questions from the chat, questions from our guests, questions from the phone line. So if anybody has questions, I don't know if any have been coming in. Sister Mary Joan, Father Chris, have you seen any questions for either ourselves or Tony?
I got one from way back from Amy Morris. She says, when you begin a case, how do you determine what is causing a haunting / demon, ghost, etc.? And then does that affect your procedure for removing it? I know we've talked about this before, but maybe if you can go over it briefly, Bishop.
Can you repeat the last part of it again, please?
I'll just say it again. From Amy Morris, when you begin a case, how do you determine what is causing a haunting, demon, ghost, etc.? And then does that affect your procedure for removing it?
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. And yes. I mean, it absolutely does affect the procedure. That's part of the investigation, why the investigation aspect is so important, because that determines how we go about effectuating the resolution. And that's what makes me different than perhaps any other exorcist you're ever going to encounter, assuming you ever encounter one, which would probably be very rare. And you probably don't want to have to encounter one, because then that usually means you're having an issue. But the reality of it is that there are many different types of spiritual illnesses, the least of which is obviously demonic possession. Not the least of which. I mean, demonic possession, of course, the worst of which is demonic possession, but the least in the sense that you're unlikely to see that one. The majority of the time, what you're going to see are all these other kinds of things that can happen. And all of those other things can have cultural characteristics that can sometimes respond better to the cultural solution. And that's where I like to work more multi-dimensionally and say that, if a person happens to not have a relationship with the church, if they're not baptized, if they're not, even a believing Christian, I can still help them, because I'll come to them at their level, wherever they're at, and I'll do what I can to help resolve the situation. Most of the time, if it is just a haunting, I don't need to really introduce any kind of over-Christianized solution to the client. I can simply make contact with this spirit and bring them home. And that can all be done without having to require anything extra of the client. But it does have the added benefit of maybe them seeing that, hopefully we are different than just about any other expectation you'd have out there, and that we're not going to judge you for being something other than a Christian. And we don't really, we're not interested in converting you. We're here for you in that capacity if that's what you want, but that's not what we're here to do. We're here to help you to live a better life, however that means to you. So if you're Jewish, Muslim, if you're from some tribal belief system, we can help. And in a lot of ways, I can help very well with those, because I actually have a lot of experience working with tribal deities and ancestral spirits. So, I don't have to really even implement a lot of the church protocols in order to help those kinds of cases. So by identifying what's going on with an individual, I am able to then craft a solution that is best suited to that family. And whatever that might mean for them, that's what I do. Now, a lot of people might not like that I do that, but I really don't give a damn, because I'm not here to work for, people's expectations. I'm here to help heal people and meet them where they're at. And hopefully, I think that's what Christ did in his lifetime. If you notice, Christ didn't do a whole lot of converting of anybody. He taught, and people made up their own minds. He never robbed anyone of their freedom to choose. And hopefully, by the work that he did, it inspired people to maybe say, well, let's go look at that. And then if they did that, well, then he was there for them and for the next stage of their spiritual evolution. But it was never...
I once gave a lecture to the Friedman Society, named after Milton Friedman, in Australia, on the principle of Christianity being the ultimate libertarian religion.
It really is. Oh, Jesus really was pure. If you had to pick a political ideology that Jesus was, people will almost always, the evangelicals will say, no, he's a conservative. No, absolutely not. Not even close. He was a libertarian by every single possible definition that you could. Right. Because original sin could not have happened if he was a Republican or a Democrat. I mean, they would have stopped it. They would have said, "Oh no. We can't let you get yourself into the situation." They would have never even been able to make the choice. The choice would have been made for them, and they would have never even known. The fact that they were allowed in their completely ignorant state to be seduced by this thing and still make free choices proves just how libertarian God really is. I honestly think that the only reason why you don't have more libertarian Christians is because they really don't understand that part of the gospel.
I agree. I mean, ultimately, the Christianity is about an individual personal decision and choice.
Right.
And yes, when you make a choice like that, you say, well, I choose that my faith will be in these things, which may then lead me to have to put limits on what I do. But that's a free choice. Mm-hmm, yeah. It's like, so often you hear people say, why won't the Catholic Church do X? Or I'm a Catholic, but I don't believe Y. You think, well, then you're not, because it's a free choice. And, if you don't like the church, don't be in it. Like, nobody is pinning you down. There's no, like, where you live, there's no religious test for holding public office.
No, no.
And so, the founding fathers were way smarter than that. That was the case, of course, in England at the time. And so, I've never understood this kind of, well, if you don't like that principle of the church, then, but what you don't get to do is say, I'm part of the church. But except I don't believe anything the church actually teaches.
Yes, that's a bit problematic, and I think
I want the title, but I don't want to earn any of it.
Yeah. I mean,
on original sin, Republicans would have charged her money to eat the apple.
That's exactly right.
And Democrats would be like, eating apples is racist.
Or at the very least, it's not environmentally sound.
That's right.
Problematic.
Yeah, it's not environmentally sound. The apple is an endangered species of fruit, so you just don't touch that one. But you can have all the other ones, you just don't touch that one.
Why do you only want to eat the green apple?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? Why do you hate red apples so much?
It's true.
Both parties can suck it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm done with it. I'm over them both. I've never really liked them, either one. If I have to classify myself, I would say I'm a libertarian. But I mean, I've liked some of the candidates. I don't like most of them. I think the libertarian candidates are very weak most of the time. Spike Cohen's a really good one, though. I would love to see him run for president. I mean, I can't see them ever, electing in this country a libertarian, but you never know. I mean, they get fed up.
It's self-defeating, isn't it? I mean, I've worked for a libertarian senator, but having a party of libertarians is impossible.
It is.
Because this is the party line. I don't follow the party line. You're a communist. Like, there's no way through it.
Here's my philosophy. Leave me alone and get off my lawn.
Yeah, that's right. So trying to get a party together of people that think like that is just impossible.
Well, that's why there's no cohesion to it. I mean, that's why. And, you need to be more consolidated and controlling to be successful in that capacity. But see, libertarians are vehemently against that kind of tactics. So that's also what leads to their undoing. And that's why they don't have the platform and the strength to be able to win these elections at that federal level. I mean, you always have like local government sometimes where they have one, but I don't see a libertarian president ever happening in my lifetime. I would love to see it, but I don't.
It's interesting. I said this to somebody here in Newcastle recently, because obviously we're all locked down at the moment. And if I said, I'm going to run as an independent member of parliament for Newcastle, and I'm going to run on the ticket of saying we're going to do less stuff. So we're going to spend less money, and we're going to shrink down the size of the government, local government here in Newcastle. So you'll get less what people consider free stuff. I mean, it's never free stuff. You already pay for it. But anyway,
Right.
So but if you stood on that mandate, so elect me, and I will do almost nothing for you. No one's going to vote for you, and so it's perverse, isn't it? The incentives that politicians have, and they're legitimate and real things. I mean, people talk about the agendas of private organizations or what have you, or private individuals, but people forget that governments have their own agendas as well. Like, I don't mean in some evil way. I just mean in a necessary way,
Yeah.
There's things that institutions need. And so, but yeah, if you stood to say, no, I'm gonna take less money from you and do less for you, we'll collect the trash, that'll be about it. Nobody would vote for you.
No, they won't. It's so much of a game. It's so much of a game. It's so much about playing with people's emotions and manipulating how they think, that it's basically just one psychological. It's one psyop is really what it is. That's the state of politics in the world, not just the United States. It's everywhere, and I think we've seen that with the current times that we're in, and all of the just the world reaction to.
I think it's human nature. It does go back to original sin or original guilt, if you want to use the kind of orthodox the more Eastern understanding of that. Which, I mean, I know this is like angels on the head of a needle, but but I think it's actually quite useful to talk about original guilt. Because people could legitimately say, well, I didn't eat that fruit. Well, yeah, but the consequences of that. This is what we experience, which is death.
Collateral damage.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like if you were to, I mean, you can do actions that affect future generations down the road. I mean, any one of us could be responsible for something that eventually leads to negative consequences for people that weren't even born yet. I mean, if global warming is a thing that that human beings have participated in, I think that even though there are natural cycles on the planet that ebb and flow, it goes through cold spells and hot spells and whatnot, I do think that the Industrial Revolution hasn't helped that at all, and has led to obviously potentially dire consequences for generations that aren't even alive yet. That's not their fault, but yet they have to live with the consequences. So I think original guilt or original sin is kind of like that,
Yeah, but and to go appealing to that is what's so important. This is one of the unthinking fruits of secularism has been, well, we can have all the fruits of Judeo-Christian thinking, philosophies, what have you, and then we'll just remove the magic bit, the mumbo jumbo, and we'll carry on. But of course, it fundamentally doesn't. You end up in this Rousseauian position where if there is no God, then there's no original sin, there's no fall, and therefore you have to agree with Rousseau that human beings are born all perfect and everywhere in chains. That it's the culture that's evil and nasty and that makes and corrupts people. But and going back to the kind of libertarian Christianity, this is why you see when people are confronted by their sin, and I include myself in this, of course. But when they're confronted by their sin, one tendency is to say, oh, well, the church needs to change. The church needs to say that's not a sin, needs to say that's a virtue sometimes.
It does.
And if they don't, then the church is conservative, you see?
Yeah.
And it's just pure projection of people's wrestling with their own situations, of which, of course, they need love and compassion. But love and compassion isn't to change what has been revealed as God's will, and so and I think that's where you get this kind of interaction of people think that the church is conservative because it's unmoving. It doesn't do the thing that I think, whatever progressive policies are doing the rounds in my current generation,
Yeah.
But it's actually, no, it's just saying, no, this is actually what is the revealed will of God, and you're free to disobey it. There was a time when they sent the Inquisition round, and that was wrong, and and that doesn't happen anymore.
No,
and so you're free to do whatever you like, but my caution would be it probably won't make you very happy if you choose to do that.
There are consequences for your actions.
Yeah. That's where we find ourselves at in society. Yeah. Literally, people are offended by everything except for sin.
You're right.
How does that affect you, Tony, as a comedian? Because, I mean, comedians are kind of expected to be sort of edgy and touch on areas that most people would find offensive.
Yeah, I don't
look at
think
Eddie Murphy.
Dice Clay would be going over too well these days.
Well, I mean, look at some of the great comedians, like, Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy.
George
I mean,
Carlin.
they all touch on these very sensitive, very offensive topics, but they get away with it because...
Well, that's the part of the reason I went to Portland. I know how to make people laugh in Florida, and if I could figure out how to do it in Portland, I got every single base covered. And the fact of the matter is, as long as it's funny, you can say whatever, because once someone has laughed at it, they can't get offended by it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
There are humorless people in this world, though. Who
humorless people, the humorless ones.
God forgot to issue them a sense of humor.
Well, they actually
with a cop at the rear end.
Well, they don't go to comedy shows.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, they don't. They're
the ones that get picked on at comedy shows.
Well, I thought you were very brave to invite a stand-up comedian onto your show, Bishop Brian. They are the quickest-witted people in the world.
Well, there's no limits to Vestiges After Dark. I mean, I try to cover the gamut here. Yeah.
R, so we're good.
No, Tony, you've been a good guest, and you're more than welcome to come back on again. But I don't want to run out of time. And
the story, Tony.
Yeah, let's hear the rest of your story.
While we were on break, I've just thought of 14 more questions that I want to ask.
Well, go for it.
So hold on to those.
Not really. Not really. No, well, here's the thing. I saved 2 stories for you.
Okay.
That I don't think that I've ever said on my podcast. I want to give a quick plug. I have a podcast. It's called Good Morning Jonestown. Mm-hmm. It's the world's #1 comedy program. It's available everywhere. We're on hiatus right now because I moved to Florida, but my co-host is moving from Portland, Florida, and we'll pick up where we left off. So please check us out. Follow me on Twitter. I think that your fans, the stuff we talk about, they would like it. So
cool. Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Good Morning Jonestown.
How's the best way to find it? Is it like on all the like
it's on
iHeartRadio on everything?
You can go to jonestownlife.com.
Okay.
But anyways, I saved the 2 experiences that I wanted to tell you about last are the 2 most terrifying things that I have ever been a part of, hands down.
Okay.
And they both happened at Southgate. So I guess I'll start with one that happened, obviously, during the summer when no one was there. And the way that the rooms were set up, the bathrooms, you had like the prefabricated, built into the wall walk-in showers.
Right.
And all of the showers had a built-in shower rod that was built into it. And I would say that the shower rod was probably 7 to 8 inches between the shower rod and the top of the shower. Mm-hmm. And obviously there was a light in the bathroom, and the light would shine in over your shower curtain and you would see. And so it was during the summer one time, and I was getting a shower, and this was in the early evening, afternoon, I'd say probably 4 or 5 p.m., whatever time I got off work, got a quick shower afterwards. And I was in the shower, and I had put shampoo in my hair, and I was looking down, and there was obviously water at the bottom of the shower, and the light was coming over that gap above the shower rod. And I paused because it was as clear as a bell in the water that I was looking down at, that it looked like there was a woman with black hair holding the rod and looking over at me.
Wow.
And it was very, and you realize how you're like, it's nothing, you know?
Yeah.
And I was looking at it and I paused kind of in fear. And then I was like, oh, it's nothing. And as I did that, I saw it back out of it. I saw it was there, and then whatever it was backed out and looked. And it was terror that I felt. And I jumped out. I didn't dry off, and I left the building. And this was the summertime. Everyone that I knew had gone home. And I went and I paid $29 to stay in this hooker motel called the Prince Murat Inn on the main drag in Tallahassee, which, man, this place is like, you know what I mean? Hooker. Like a pay by the hour motel. It was the cheapest place
doors
around.
On the outside. Yeah.
Coin slot on the bed.
Right.
Haunted.
Informal brothel, you know?
It was so many hookers have died there from drugs and murder. And like that place was haunted. I felt so much safer being there. I just had to get out of the building. And it was the type of thing, of course, I could explain it away all day. The mind plays tricks on you. But I'll tell you this, I never looked down in the shower again the whole time I was there. For the next 2 years, I never looked down. It affected me so much that I never, and that's it obviously can't be like it was real, but it was real enough that I never looked down in the shower again. I just looked forward and bathed my body and got out. And that was, I mean, it was as clear as a bell. Obviously, I couldn't see the face of it, but it was a shadow and it was hair and there were hands. And it was Lulu.
Yeah.
It was who I had pictured in my mind. You know, this was a year after we had coined the name Lulu. And it was the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me personally.
Did you ever look at the Ted Bundy victims that were murdered there and see if they looked like what you might have seen?
I did. I haven't. Honestly, I thought about that earlier in our conversation when I knew that we were doing that. And I didn't want to Google it while we were talking on there.
Well, I'm going to bring up their pictures if I can. Let me see if it will actually let me do that. It'll take me just a second to swipe them off of the internet here, but I want you to look at these pictures and see if it might be. Actually, here they are. I believe these are the Sister Mary Joan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was Levy and Bowman, right?
Margaret Bowman, and I think it was Lisa Levy.
I don't remember the first name, but let me go ahead and see if I can pull this up and put it on the screen. Do you happen?
Margaret Bowman was one of them.
Yeah, I've never
Lisa
tried.
Levy, I think, was the other one.
I've never had to try the screen share, but let's see if it works here.
Look.
Are you seeing it?
Well, look at Bowman. Dark hair.
God.
It's not working for the people on the YouTube. Let me go ahead and put up.
I saw it.
I'm going to put it up on YouTube.
Briefly, and that gal on the right.
And Tony, I would say the brunette, I believe that's Miss Bowman.
YouTube, hang on here. I'm bringing it up here for you. Here it is, and it's coming.
I mean, look.
Creepy, huh?
Yeah. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, I give you my word.
Well, I can hear the music on my monitor now, so I think it's probably a problem. the audio came back just before the breaks.
Okay, I think we've got this worked out. I apologize for that little issue there. I did not know exactly what happened, but I don't think screen share is something we can do again. And my screen's all messed up now. I had it nice and neat before, and now it is messed up. But we're going to try to bring everybody back here. And again, I apologize that happened. It's a little bit of an experiment here. And like I said, my screen's all messed up, but you know, we are, and honestly, I've never used Zoom as a host until 2 weeks ago, and so I'm new to Zoom. But also, Zoom behaves differently when you're integrating it into all this other stuff. So far, I think we're doing fairly well. But this is like the second show we've used this stuff, so bear with me. We're making it better each time. Well, thank you. I mean, part of the difficulty, I have to say, is, I am a little bit of a multitasker. I think that comes from flying airplanes. You kind of have to be. But at the same time, when you're flying airplanes, you're not having to actually make coherent sense of very deep philosophical thoughts and answer questions intelligently. Host a show, talk to your guests, talk to your callers. You still sound coherent, and then yet have to handle the switchboard, the audio mixer, the video mixer. It's a bit overwhelming. I think we're
lose my temper and throw it out the window. So you're doing great, Bishop.
I'm telling you, I mean, it's been a challenge, but we're going to get this better. But I think everyone, let the chat, let me know if we've lost audio or if we've lost video, but I think everybody's back now. And I think we've got everyone on here now. So it's just the video's all askew, but bear with me. But yeah, we've got about 15 minutes left. So you said you had 2 experiences, Tony, that were the most terrifying related to that. What was the second one?
Well, I saved the best for last. And this, I'm going to have to do give you a little exposition about the basement of this building to get us where we need to be. But this didn't happen to me, but I was a part of it. And I understand when people tell ghost stories or whatever that it might seem like I'm exaggerating, but I believe this person with all of my heart that this happened. So the way that the basement worked, I said there was a cafeteria, and behind the scenes in the cafeteria on the first floor, there was all the prep stations and dishwashers, and then there was a stairwell that goes down to the basement and an elevator back there that goes down to the basement. Once you get down there, you can go to the right and go in the kitchen, and it's a large kitchen where they cook all the food for the dorm, or you can go left and you would run into maintenance where the maintenance department was, and then it curves around. It's like a U shape. And then on the bottom of the U, if you will, there was the RA room where we kept our arts and crafts. And all of these rooms had to be locked at all times.
Right.
And next to that was a storage room, a very large storage room where they kept all of the furniture, like extra mattresses, hutches, desks, all of the extra stuff that you need to put in the dorm rooms. It was a very large room. Then you go around, next to that, there were the bottom of the elevators that led up to the dorm rooms, which I had all the keys to the building, to everything, the master key. And there are elevator keys where if I go into the dorm room elevator to go up to the dorm rooms, I could put a key in and turn it, and those elevators would go down to the basement, but you had to have a key. Now, the other side of the U, it was all like furnaces and all the plumbing and stuff. So the basement was creepy out of the gate because there's just a ton of noises. It's dark. There's water dripping. You can hear the water going through the building. In the kitchen area, there's large walk-in freezers, and then on the other side of those is like the boiler room. So it's like if you were to walk around this, there would this U shape. There would be 40 different temperature changes. You know what I mean? It's just creepy. Everything you think, it's just terrifying. And nobody liked going down there. Now, during the day, there's workers and stuff down there, but at nighttime is another. And RAs never wanted to go down there. It was a part of my life. I would have to go down there probably once every night. And it was the type of situation I never felt. I never didn't feel uneasy going down there. But again, like I said, it was the type of situation like, I'm going to get out of college not being up to date. My eyeballs mess with me. I don't care. I'm really lucky to work there. I'd have to go down and cut keys if someone lost their key. Like, I would have to go down there all the time, and it was always creepy.
Right. So
there was one particular night, we had an RA meeting earlier in the day, and I told them this was during the school year. This was probably the last 3 months of my time there. And school was in. The building was full. And I told the RAs, on each floor, they had a bulletin board, and they had to decorate it for the residents and do that. And so I said to them, hey, you have to have your bulletin boards done by Friday. And I'll go down tonight and unlock the arts and crafts room so you can go in there. It's only going to be open for 2 days. So you got to till then, and I'm locking it up. So it's got to be done by then.
Right.
So one evening I was going to go down and unlock it for them to do that the day I told them. And I went through the cafeteria and went down the stairwell. And I was in there unlocking the drawers where the arts and crafts and stuff were. And I heard, help me. It was like, help me. But it wasn't something that terrified me. Like, have you ever heard something and you're like, that was in my head. I didn't really hear that.
Oh yeah.
Right.
You know,
until you hear it again.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
I heard it in my head, but I wasn't like, whoa, someone really said that. I would just heard it and it creeped me out, and I went upstairs. And behind the cafeteria, they had like where they would keep the like the cookies and cakes and stuff, and we could go and get those anytime. So after I unlocked that, I went and I got a piece of pie or something, and I was standing there eating it. And this girl, her name's Kristen, and she's like a hot shot in Washington, D.C. now, whole shebang, and she will attest to this. She came into the back of the cafeteria while I was back there, and she's like, I'm going to go down and get the stuff to make my bulletin board. Will you come with me? And I was like, heck no, man. I was like, I was just down there, and I heard something go, help me. And she was like, oh, screw you, or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And she went down there, and I was just messing with her, you know.
Yeah.
And probably, I don't know, 5 minutes later, I got a call on my cell phone, and she was like, screw you, I hate your guts so much, you are evil, I hate you. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, I went into the room, and again, next to it's the very large storage room. They share a wall where
Right.
all of the desks and everything are. And she said, I was in there and I heard, help me. And then she said, and it scared her. And then she started hearing it being screamed on the other side in that storage room. And she ran out and came up and called and cussed me out. She was convinced that I used the key to get down into the basement from the other elevators, went into there and did that to scare her. She was absolutely serious, furious with me, would not believe that I didn't do that to her. And I've never seen someone terrified. And that was, I think, the last experience I had there, but that was the most blatant, horrifying thing that it creeps me out when I think about it. I'm glad it didn't happen to me. And, but she was just absolutely convinced that I did that to her.
Right.
And I did not.
Now, back to the...
Brian, can I ask you a question related to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Which is, it's often the case that there are things in, or there are presences in places where people don't usually go, basements, out of the way places. Yeah, exactly. And so, and I've experienced those things both as a child and in this ministry. But I wondered if you had any kind of thoughts, reflections, learning on is it because they just want to be left alone? What's your thinking on why they're often in those sorts of places?
I think it's, again, part of archetypal resonance, and it goes to show that everything is archetypally aligned by a vibratory rate. And back to the occult principle of like attracts like, similar vibratory rates are going to find compatibility, and ones that are vastly different from one another are going to be in conflict. This is ultimately what creates things like political division and other types of differences of ideology. But it also, at the most metaphysical, fundamental level, it also produces our alignments to the various incorporeal aspects of the universe. And so dark things, underground things like caves, that archetypally align to the underworld as it is understood archetypally, is going to vibrate at that same rate as those types of things. So just like when you think about even, scripture referring to the dead as the shades, it implies a sort of darkness to them. And Sheol always invokes a sort of dark image in one's mind, sort of a wasting away in this nothingness abyss that barely conscious of it, but not really any light, not really, you know, I mean, how your mind perceives something that's inconceivable like Sheol is going to archetypally align to the underworld, you know, everything that we relate to. So caves are entrances to the underworld, literally, but also figuratively. In fact, more importantly, figuratively. Basements are sort of the modern day equivalent of that, because now we have access points to this underworld in our own homes where, you know, we can exist there. And also it relates archetypally to the fact that we have traditionally, historically buried our dead. In underground places,
and most
tombs,
basements
and
are surrounded.
Yes.
You know, they're
It's interesting because
underground.
I grew up in England where, you know, we had a cellar, a basement in my house, but in Australia there generally are no basements.
yeah, like Florida. Florida has no basements.
Georgia doesn't have very many either.
No, well, I mean, the expensive homes in Georgia tend to have underground basements, but if you're, you know, homes under 250,000 typically don't.
Yeah, that'd be me. That'd be me.
Yeah.
No basement here.
Yeah. But we can have them. It's just it's more
I have
expensive.
2 basements. If you were wondering how I'm doing financially.
Overachieving.
And you live in Florida, so I mean that's really a feat to
Exactly.
behold. I mean,
Not to toot my own horn, but beep, beep.
there you go.
Now we just suspect you're a serial killer.
He comes on, talks about serial killing, you know, it's all about archetypal alignment, I'm telling you. But no, I mean, that's how it really works. So again, energetically, the way that the archetypal world sort of puts all of these things into these neat little packages produces these effects. So like attracts like. And so archetypally, the resonance is such. Now that's how we perceive it though. It doesn't mean they're really there. You know, not in any, not as they would see it. They probably don't see themselves, assuming they could see themselves, but most ghosts don't really have cognitive function like we think of cognitive function. It's more of like a core awareness, more like an instinct that an animal has than it is like a intelligent thought like we would possess. Ghosts don't have that kind of capability because, I mean, the brain really produces that kind of connection to reason. Consciousness kind of requires that type of tangibility in a physical environment in order to produce that kind of intellection. Otherwise, it's just raw instinct. So ghosts actually operate more on the instinctual level. So, you know, as they're seeing their environment, whatever limited faculties of awareness they possess, how they perceive their environment, it's not going to be like, oh, I'm drifting in basements or, you know, I'm in dark places. That's just because archetypally our minds project that vibratory rate into the experience, and that's where our minds put them. But you know, you can collect EVPs, assuming it's not a windy day. You can collect EVPs on a nice sunny day on the beach. You know, you can collect paranormal data anywhere. It's just we tend to need for ourselves, for our own personal stories, these connections to these dark and mysterious and slightly scary kinds of places. Just like children with under the bed, or the closet. There's all these different places that are frightening and scary. But we have unfortunately reached the end of the show. It goes so quickly, even 3 hours. But yeah. Tony, I really appreciate you coming on, and I would like to. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, well, I'd extend to you an invitation to come back. I mean, this was great.
I wouldn't want to interrupt the guest that you have on, but dude, if you ever have one of your Q&A episodes and you'd like me to, I would love to join you for that. If that's something you and your listeners would like. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, get your questions ready, and yeah, no problem.
Absolutely, we do open shows a lot, and you are always welcome to. You have the information to log into this Zoom room, so feel free to come in when we're airing on a open topics, open lines show, and we'd love to have you back.
Well, thank you so much. This made my week.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the East Coast, Tony.
Thank you so much.
You got it.
Sister Mary Joan, thank you. Father Chris, thank you. And
Hi, everybody.
It's nice to meet you.
Yeah.
And to you, yeah.
Thank you again. And to all of you out there, thanks for listening to Vestiges After Dark. Next week, we're going to be talking about the afterlife and reincarnation. So don't miss that. And I apologize for the little technical glitch that I caused by sharing my screen. Didn't know that would happen. I won't do that again. But next week, we'll see you Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Take care, everyone.